All right, so today, let's dive into something pretty intense.
Okay.
But honestly, this stuff's too important to ignore, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about nuclear war,
Yeah.
a topic that makes everyone a little uneasy, I think it's safe to say.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think most of the fear is really just not knowing the specifics. It's like this big, scary thing.
Right.
And that's part of what makes Annie Jacobson's work so important.
Yeah.
She really gets into the nitty-gritty of it all.
Absolutely. And she's not just some armchair analyst, right?
Right.
Jacobson spent years investigating the Pentagon intelligence agencies like the real deal.
Mm-hmm.
And her book, Nuclear War, a scenario,
Yeah.
equal parts fascinating and terrifying, honestly.
Really is.
Especially with, all the global tension these days.
And here's the thing. Even if the headlines weren't full of potential conflict, right? Jacobson argues that just the fact that these weapons exist makes their eventual use more likely.
Yeah.
Just as a matter of statistics,
Wow.
It's a sobering thought.
Seriously sobering. So no time like the present to unpack this, I guess.
Right.
And Jacobson, she starts with a real jaw-dropper. Did you know that in the U.S.,
Okay.
the president has sole authority to launch a nuclear strike?
It's wild.
No need to call Congress.
Yeah.
No second opinions needed.
Yeah.
One person gets to make that call.
Yeah, it's really something.
It's wild, right?
It makes you think about the checks and balances or lack thereof.
Right.
What happens if someone's under immense stress?
Yeah.
Maybe even acting irrationally. And Jacobson actually found that Congress was concerned enough about this.
Really?
Where they actually did an investigation to see if it was true, and they confirmed it.
Wow.
So it seems like it just comes down to that ticking clock.
Right, because once a missile is launched, I mean, there's not a lot of time to debate or anything.
Yo.
Speaking of which, how fast are we even talking here?
Well,
If things went south, how much time would we have?
an ICBM, so an intercontinental ballistic missile,
Okay.
could travel from, say, Russia to the U.S. in about 30 minutes.
That's it?
That's barely enough time to process what's happening, let alone have a nuanced discussion about retaliation.
30 minutes. Okay, now I'm getting nervous.
Yeah.
And we're not even talking about the scale of destruction here.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know about Hiroshima and Nagasaki,
Right.
but those bombs were practically firecrackers compared to today's thermonuclear weapons.
It's true. What we're talking is exponentially more powerful, smaller, too.
Right.
Thanks to decades of Cold War arms race advancements.
Yeah.
Jacobson actually interviewed Richard Garwin for this book,
Okay.
a physicist who helped design the first thermonuclear bomb. And his descriptions of the destructive power are actually
I bet.
pretty chilling.
Okay, so faster missiles, bigger bombs.
Yeah.
Anything else we should be worried about?
Well, just the nuclear submarines lurking beneath the waves.
Oh, right.
Armed and ready, Jacobson actually calls them handmaidens of the apocalypse.
Wow.
Undetectable, always there. It adds a whole other level of tension to the equation.
It does. And here's the really scary part. Jacobson's research suggests that a full-scale nuclear war
Yeah.
wouldn't be some drawn-out conflict.
Right.
She spoke with General Keeler, former commander of U.S. Strategic Command,
Okay.
and he estimated that it would all be over in about 72 minutes.
72 minutes.
Yeah.
That's it. Let that sink in for a moment. It wouldn't be about winning or losing at that point.
Right.
Just complete annihilation.
We're not just talking hypotheticals either, this 72-minute scenario.
Right.
This came directly from war games, right?
Exactly. There was this chilling war game back in 1983 called Proud Prophet.
Oic.
Thankfully, it's declassified now. But the conclusion was terrifying. No matter how a nuclear war starts, it always ends the same way, global annihilation.
Wow. So it doesn't even matter who starts it?
Nope.
What the alliances are?
Nope.
Everybody loses.
Everybody loses.
Wow. And that's why it's so unsettling when Jacobson uses the phrase Mad King to describe a country like North Korea.
Yeah.
Wait, she compares North Korea to a mad king.
She does. It's actually a really powerful metaphor
Correct.
for the unpredictable nature of a nation that has these capabilities.
Right.
They're constantly testing missiles, ignoring international norms.
Right.
It just creates this constant undercurrent of worry.
Yeah, it's like they're playing with fire and the whole world is just standing around watching.
Exactly.
But even with all of our safeguards, all these protocols and everything, Jacobson found examples of how easily things can go wrong.
Oh, yeah.
even with the most sophisticated systems.
Totally. And that's where the human element comes into play.
Yeah,
Which is even scarier in some ways.
right.
Remember the story of former Secretary of Defense Bill Perry? During the Carter administration, a misplaced VHS tape,
What?
a training scenario, was mistaken for a real Soviet attack.
Hold on, a VHS tape almost caused World War III.
Almost. He was moments away from informing the president when they realized it was a mistake.
Oh my gosh.
Can you imagine the weight of that decision, thinking you're about to unleash global annihilation?
That's a level of stress I can't even fathom.
Yeah, and it just highlights how fragile these systems are.
Wow.
How much relies on human beings under unimaginable pressure, making split-second decisions with incomplete information.
And those human beings, even with the best intentions,
Right.
have created weapons of almost unimaginable destructive power.
Yes.
Jacobson describes a 1-megaton bomb hitting the Pentagon.
180 million degrees Fahrenheit at the point of impact.
What?
Instantaneous fires across a 9-mile radius.
9 miles?
Mega fires consuming hundreds of square miles.
Wait, 9 miles?
Right.
That's like most of insert major city near where the podcast is recorded, gone in a flash.
Exactly. And then there's the radiation poisoning.
Right.
A slow and agonizing death for those outside the immediate blast zone.
And if that wasn't bad enough, there's also nuclear winter to contend with.
That's right. Jacobson draws on the work of Professor Brian Toon here,
Okay.
whose research suggests that we could see a decade-long global winter.
A decade.
A decade. Imagine widespread crop failure,
Wow.
billions dying from starvation and radiation. The initial blast is just the tip of the iceberg.
It's crazy. This is where that quote from Khrushchev comes to mind.
Oh, yeah.
After a nuclear war, the survivors would envy the dead.
It's haunting, but it really underscores the level of suffering we're talking about. The people who survive that initial blast might be the unlucky ones,
Right.
facing a desolate and unforgiving world.
It's hard to even wrap your head around it.
Yeah.
You know, the scale of the devastation,
All right.
the long-term consequences.
It's bleak, but that's why Jacobson's book is so important.
Yeah.
She's forcing us to confront this possibility, this horrifying possibility, and really grapple with what's at stake.
Absolutely. So, knowing all of this, where do we even begin to look for solutions?
Right.
Is there any way out of this mess that we've created?
Well, Jacobson argues that the first step is understanding how we got here.
Okay.
And she points to this idea of deterrence
Okay.
as this flawed but persistent logic that's driven nuclear strategy for decades.
Break that down for me. What exactly is deterrence?
So deterrence is basically the idea that if both sides have enough nuclear weapons to destroy each other, then neither side will risk starting a war.
Right.
It's this terrifying stalemate,
Right.
this game of don't blink with the fate of the world hanging in the balance.
So it only works if everyone plays by the rules.
Right.
But if someone, like, say, a mad king,
Right.
decides to go rogue, it all goes out the window.
Exactly. Deterrence relies on rational actors, predictable behavior.
Right.
And we've seen with North Korea how quickly things can veer off course.
Right.
Plus, there's always that risk of miscalculation or some kind of technological error.
Like that misplaced VHS tape that almost started a war.
Right.
It's crazy to think that something so simple
Oh, yeah.
could have such catastrophic consequences.
It really illustrates the fragility of it all.
Yeah.
Even with supposedly advanced technology.
Right.
And it's not just VHS tapes.
Yep.
A lot of these systems rely on surprisingly outdated technology.
Yo.
It's a recipe for disaster.
And it's not like those systems are just sitting idle.
Right.
Jacobson talks about these submarine-launched ballistic missiles,
Yeah.
incredibly sophisticated weapons
Right.
that navigate by the
I
stars.
know.
It sounds like something out of a science fiction novel.
It does, but that's the reality.
It's wild.
And it makes you realize how vulnerable these systems are.
Right.
Even the most advanced ones.
Especially with the rise of artificial intelligence. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
if a misplaced VHS tape can almost trigger a nuclear war,
Right.
what happens when AI systems are involved in these command and control structures?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. We're talking about systems that can process information faster, learn at an exponential rate.
What?
It's both exciting and terrifying.
Exciting and terrifying. I think that sums up the 21st century pretty well.
Yeah.
But seriously, how do we even begin to manage that risk?
Well, that's what Jacobson wants us to grapple with.
Okay.
Who controls these AI systems?
Right.
How do we make sure that they're programmed with the right safeguards, the right values?
Yeah.
Can we really trust machines with that level of power?
Especially when those machines might be able to hack into other countries' systems
Right.
that aren't as technologically advanced or as carefully controlled.
Exactly.
The potential for unintended consequences is huge.
It all circles back to Jacobson's central argument. As long as these weapons exist,
Yeah.
that risk of their use, whether intentional or accidental, will always be there.
So where do we go from here? Is a world without nuclear weapons even possible at this point?
Well, Jacobson doesn't claim to have all the answers,
Sure.
but she does offer some hope. She talks about the impact of that 1983 TV movie, The Day After,
Oh, okay.
the one that depicted a nuclear attack on the U.S.
Yeah, that movie was bleak, to say the least.
Yeah,
But it really got people talking. It sparks this national conversation about nuclear war.
it really did. And it seemed to even influence President Reagan's thinking about disarmament.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's kind of wild to think about like a TV movie
Wow.
having that kind of impact.
It does, but it also shows that these stories, these glimpses into what a nuclear war could actually look like,
Yeah.
they can have a real impact.
Jacobson argues that storytelling can be a really powerful tool for change,
Right.
even with something as overwhelming as nuclear war.
It makes sense, right? I mean, we all connect to stories.
Mhm.
They make us feel things. They make us think.
Exactly. And those emotions, that empathy, can be incredibly powerful motivators for action.
So we need more stories like The Day After.
Whoa.
More stark reminders of what's at stake.
It's a tough balance, you know?
Right.
Because you don't want to paralyze people with fear.
Right.
But you also can't sugarcoat the reality.
Yeah, no easy answers here. One thing that really struck me in Jacobson's book was that anecdote about the general that she initially saw as kind of an antagonist.
Oh, yeah, the one who emailed her explaining that his silence was because of his wife's illness.
Yes, such a human moment, you
Yeah.
know. In the midst of all this talk about strategy and weapon systems,
Right.
it makes you realize how quickly we judge,
Yeah.
how easily we label people,
Mm-hmm.
especially in this world of, conflict and intelligence agencies and all that.
That's Jacobson's point. We have to resist that urge.
Right.
Instead of reducing people to labels or stereotypes, we need to remember our shared humanity.
Especially when we disagree with each other.
Exactly. Because if we can find that common ground,
Yeah.
even in the face of something as divisive as nuclear weapons, then maybe there's hope for us yet.
Maybe those connections, that empathy, can help us build a different kind of future.
A future where nuclear war isn't just this terrifying possibility,
Right.
but a relic of the past,
Yeah.
A chilling reminder of what we almost lost.
A future where those 72 minutes never have to be counted down.
Now that's a future worth fighting for.
It really is. Well, this has been a heavy one,
Yeah,
but incredibly important.
absolutely.
Always good to remind ourselves what's at stake and what we could lose.
It is. Jacobson reminds us that as long as these weapons exist,
Right.
there's a chance they'll be used,
Yeah.
whether by design or by accident.
So I'll leave you with this. What responsibility do we have as individuals and as a global community
Right.
to address this threat? Is a world with zero nuclear weapons possible,
Right.
or is that just a utopian ideal?
It's a question worth asking.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Talk about it. Let's keep the conversation going.
Yes.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back next time with another exploration of the ideas shaping our world. Until then, take care.